Welcome to everyone on live stream. And welcome to everybody here. It is a real pleasure to welcome you to Parsons, to one of our newer spaces at Parsons. We've been remaking this building and set of complexes over the course of the last few years. So if you come visit us every 6 months to a year, we have some new space to share with you, and we're very happy to welcome you to this one, and in particular to this collaborative event and this conversation today, which I think is super important. And the question is framed for you here on the board, and those of you who are on live stream, you can see the question. I have a friendly amendment to it. I'm not quite sure that there's only an urgency for tomorrow. I think there's an urgency for today. And so hopefully this will find its way into our conversation today, because I really do feel, I think we all feel, that the issues that we can be addressing and what design and the implications of design in a world that is rapidly being transformed by human action, that is being abandoned, at least in this country, by political will, and in which we really need to be thinking about how we make change through design, through thoughtful action, through systems change. All of these are core to what we can bring as designers and innovators and creative people to a conversation that is desperately in need. And I think that's not just a domestic US question. I think that's an international one. So the urgency I feel globally. I do want to make a few comments at the beginning of this, though, that have been written down, and so I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody in the process. And I should say, we have had a very long and really extraordinary collaboration at this point with the Danish consulate here in New York. It started, well, it's been going on for many years, but it really started with the Young Danish Design Awards, which we hosted here in 2012, which happened to be at the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of Finn Juhl, as well as the coordination of the reopening of the Trusteeship Council later that year, and the work of Kasper Salto and Sisgaard, the two of them, and Thomas Sisgaard. It takes a moment, but I've been saying that name for so many years, and I just screwed it up here for the first time.
It is good old Freud.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. So we started this partnership around the sharing of extraordinary Danish design, and indeed the conversation as to what was going on within Parsons and our design studios at that same time. And we have been able to build that and deepen that relationship through the curricular work that we're doing here at the school. And in fact, for now 9 semesters in a row, almost 5 years, we have been hosted by the Danish consulate at the Trusteeship Council chamber with a group of about 500 students each time who are taking a class on sustainability and design. We call it sustainable systems. And the ambassador has been kind enough to join us in a presentation on the transformation of that room as a reflection of both this history of Danish design and the way what is happening today is brought into it, which is where Salto and Sisgaard make so much sense. And indeed, the broader questions of climate and environment that we are looking at in that class. And so gathering at the United Nations in that room to talk about design, to talk about culture, to talk about the difference that design can make with those students has been very transformative for our institution. And so I always want to thank you every time I see Anne and the Danish consulate for this collaboration. And that inspires, I think, what we can talk about here today across not just our courses in sustainability, but our courses in design more broadly, and our courses in business and strategy, because these two things are linked. We think very much in systems here at Parsons, and we think that way through the made, designed world, as well as the world that is constructed through strategy and process and business. And so this conversation today across all these realms is going to be of great interest. I don't know, I'm not being, I don't have everyone's name here to thank. I can tell you that all of the people that are the institutions that are involved in this Future That Design Can Make symposium, including the Danish Design Center, where the Danish Design Awards are hosted and where we will be jurying. The entire jury is here. I am joining the jury. This is our first jury meeting. This is, you all have to close your ears and not listen because we're going to meet in the corner and have discussion about the work. But it's an honor to join you in making these decisions this year. I look forward to our deliberations in the springtime. Also, the Danish School Kolding, the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts, the Designmuseum Denmark, as well as our colleagues at the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, which are deep participants, if you will, not real colleagues in the making of our educational programs here at Parsons. For more than 30 years, we have co-created a program, a master's program in design and curatorial studies, and it is a very important part of what we do here, in addition to the extraordinary work of the museum. So we're thrilled to have you all here today. I'm looking forward to the conversation, so without further ado, I'm handing this off to...
From Design Denmark.
Yeah. No, I didn't, did I? Holy shit.
It's okay.
Let me begin again and talk to you about... Okay.
Thank you. So we have to go here, Tim, I guess. So very Danish, we do our presentation together, and we'll do very short. We only had 5 minutes, but I would like to spend 2 seconds on saying that my old teacher Lucille Tanas is sitting in the audience. So that is fantastic. Yeah. So I feel home here in Parsons. We have, I think that, is that ours? Okay. So we have got this question on how does design drive the social change today, and I think that what's important for us quickly is to just go to the past, just to make sure that we all know that what Danish design is so well known, not that we want to repeat it again and again, but that chair and that product design had really driven the brand Danish design over the many, many years. But it has also been a dilemma in somehow. We have taken out this picture of the chair called the egg. You probably know it, some of you. So the process for us now is to break out of the egg. And that we started off with some years ago. We felt that in our industry we needed to find alliances across. We started off allying the design industry. You can probably not imagine, but we were not aligned in the design industry in Denmark, even though the design plays such a big role. So we established the Danish Design Association, and at that time we also had the Danish designers. These two organizations we brought together under one name called Design Denmark. And the Design Denmark is spelled with a capital D for design and a small letter D for Denmark, because we think design is bigger than our country. And then after that, we started a collaboration between the governmental institution that the Danish Design Center is, and that you know so well, and everybody knows so well when you come to Copenhagen. And because we felt that it's very important to establish that connection between these two organizations, and not just by having the same shared emails and all that, but actually work together. So the establishment of the Danish Design Award was the reason why that we came together as a united group. I think this is the next slide, right?
So we have this question, how does design drive societal change? And if you were going to put it in one word, we would say synergy. So one way of looking at design in general is that it is a synergy. It's a synergy of different competencies. It's a synergy between the client and the designer. It's a synergy between business, technology, and user needs. So design is a synergy and creates value through that synergy. And that's how it solves problems. However, as we've noticed, and Jesper just explained, the bigger the problems get, the more greater synergies you need. So we had to, in Denmark, align the design profession, and through aligning the government arm for design and the professionals, we've created another synergy, which is expressed in the Danish Design Award, which is what we'd like to talk a little bit about in the rest of the 5 minutes we have left. So if you can imagine, we have an association of designers, and we have the government arm of design, and really both are trying to do the same thing. You know, we're trying to move design into a new period. We're trying to communicate the value of design. We're trying to do great projects. We're trying to get people enthusiastic about design. But prior to the Danish Design Award, working in two different camps really. So what we did over the course of a couple of workshops was we put everybody who was interested in design from the Danish Design Award together with a group of designers from the Professional Association and said, what is it we want to do with this award? It was the 50th year of the award, and it was having a relaunch. And you can imagine the room was covered with post-its and posters and whiteboards and lots of incoherence. But when we sifted through it, we found that what we had shared was this. We share a love for what design can do. That was the thing that united the government side and the practitioner side, who previously had been, not that close, one could say. So with this sharing a love of what design can do, we had a shift of focus from design as artifact to design as effect. And from here, we could create the categories that would demonstrate to everybody the positive effects that design could have. So these categories we have here, things like save money, better learning, clean solutions, young talent, they're all expressions of the effect of design. And in the 2 years that we've run the award so far, we've already generated lots and lots of examples of how design can positively influence our society.
Yeah, what we have realized was that because we gave these categories the names that we have given them and the meaning that is behind it, that we can look at each category every year with our new eyes according to the time we're in. They're constantly changing, but not the names. But what we also felt was that the total of these 4 overall categories, which is business, individual, society, and special. And under special, we have all those awards like the Icon Award and the Young Talent Award and the People's Choice and the Visionary Concepts and Employment Growth. All those 4 overall categories, the total of those is reflecting the welfare society. Of course, it's reflecting the welfare society of Denmark, but it's actually also reflecting a welfare society. And that's why we're here today. And that's why this whole group is united, because we can unite around these categories. Some of us are very often sitting in other juries around the world, and what we're focusing on is relevant according to the problem, is it well executed, is it innovative, which is traditionally how you judge other awards. We also do that in Danish Design Award, but we have that other extra layer, which is that what we are looking at is the difference that design can do. This is what we're celebrating, the difference design can do.
And this was the external expression of we share a love of what design can do. We can't go out and communicate that. But if you turn it around and say, okay, what are we really doing here? Well, we're celebrating with these categories in this award the difference that design can make. So this has become our sort of a mantra, if you like, for the award, our rallying point for the award.
Some of the cases, I'm not going to go through all the cases, but I'm just going to show you some few of them that has that element of synergy, like the case Be My Eyes, where you had this app. The synergy is obvious between the fact that if you have an iPhone or other equal phone, then with this app you can help the blind. You can give your eyes to the blind. The blind can give you a call, and then you can read on the milk carton what it is, how old it is, and so forth, and help that. I'm a member of Be My Eyes, and the funny thing is that it's really difficult to help a blind because everybody wants to. So I'm too late always. But that's how it is. So it's a very big success. Another one is under the category, I just took that out because I think some of you knows about Noma, and that's from the Special Award. Noma became the winner here in 2017 and got the Icon Award because Noma has become an icon, not only for Denmark. I'm sure the consulate had mentioned Noma once in a while. And I'm sure some of you know that Claus Meyer was the founder of Noma. Claus Meyer is now in Penn Station and doing a lot of good things. Noma has generated so much for not only for restaurants, but also for the food industry, which I'm working in at Pearl Fisher, doing packaging design with food. It really matters, the Nordic approach, and how much they care about what they do, and then how much they go into details. So synergy is the key word for us in this short speech that we are now soon done with. So the thing is that you can create synergy only if there is friendship. And about synergy, it's about trust, really. And trust is a value that we feel that we can carry on our shoulders. Coming out of Denmark, trust is a big keyword. It's actually on the level of design. We're well known for a trustworthy nation. There's a good reason we pay 50% in tax. And it goes for something good. And then what we also like and need is sharing, because we're a small country. We love the taking part of and being part of teams. So this is also why we're here, and also this is why that we have been able to unite ourselves together. And what we feel, Tim and I, and the group that is here today, is that what we like to see is not a welfare society, but a society of well-being in the future. And we want to take part of that because we know as designers we can make a difference. We just need to do it together. That's why we're here. Thank you. Next one.
We're going to hear from Matilda McQuaid next.
So I'm Matilda McQuaid, Deputy Curatorial Director and Head of Textiles at Cooper Hewitt, and it's great to be here, and thank you to the Danish Consulate and Parsons for putting this on. I'm going to talk about 3 principles that I think are really important in terms of design, and that and I sort of see design as a tool that gives people a chance to have agency, so to believe in oneself, that they can make a difference, and I'm going to show you some examples of this. Design is a tool that gives people also access, so not only kind of open source, but making it easier for people to do something. And design is a tool that gives people the ability to act, so gives action, to drive social change. And I think these 3 principles of agency, access, and action are some of the most important things in design today, and that designers, I think, are focusing on in their work. So I'm going to go through 5 projects very quickly that I think exemplify the use of these sort of 3 principles of action, access, and agency. The first one here is an exhibition that Cooper Hewitt did. It's actually right now down at the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C., called Scraps, Fashion, Textiles, and Creative Reuse. And it features 3 designers, Christina Kim from Los Angeles, Reiko Sudo from Tokyo, Japan, and Luisa Chavese from Milan, Italy. And it's all how they use textile scraps in very creative ways. So I'm only going to show one example. This is Christina Kim, who was very enamored with the beautiful Jamdani saris, which are all woven saris in India, and decided to create a whole sort of clothing line out of them. But what she realized, and this is kind of a flow chart of how she creates the clothing and then what she's left over with, and then she kind of keeps recreating and repurposing those scraps until finally she's left with just a minuscule scrap at the very bottom where you see these little amulets, as she calls them. But it was more than just sort of the idea of scraps, but it was also giving people work. Instead of having to spend money on materials, she could repurpose that material and pay, relatively generous wages at the time. So this was one of the three designers, and I'm happy to answer questions later, but this gives you a sense of what sort of the creative imagination and what people can do given, sort of this challenge of environmental waste. What are we going to do with these billions of tons of textile waste? The second one is the problem is the danger of border crossing for migrant workers. And this was an organization, a volunteer organization called Humane Borders. And this is a map that shows you the over 3,000 deaths, most of which resulted from dehydration, because migrants, when they're crossing the border from Mexico into Arizona, there's no water. And so all the red sort of dots indicate deaths on the US side, and then the blue flags indicate our water stations. And this is what Humane Border has done. Not only are they helping to advocate for policy change, but also having humanitarian assistance to create these water stations. And what they've done is that they've created this blue flag, which gives visibility to the water station from a distance, and then the universal color of water is blue. And then it has agua. And so there are lots of little sort of technical things that they did to also help make sure that there is water always there. But it is, I think there's now several hundred locations where they have these water stations. So that's Humane Borders, and that's been around since 2000. The next one is sort of the issue of homelessness, and specifically housing for formerly homeless veterans. This is Michael Maltzan Architects. He created this housing this is called Crest Apartments in Los Angeles, and kind of a leftover urban space. But it is, what's interesting about it is not only kind of a place for the veterans to live permanently, but it also has all of the social services they need in order to find a job, medical care, all the facilities that they need. So this is it's an all-purpose kind of facility. So again, sort of, bringing access to all these to these vets that need these services. The next one is the problem of material pollution, which actually kind of relates to the first one of textile waste. And so what do we do with, certainly the plastic bags that we see polluting the ocean? But there are lots of designers who are looking at how to grow your own materials, grow them for, your specific needs at the time, so you don't create leftover waste. So this has been around for a long time. There's lots of designers using this idea of mycelium or mushrooms to grow packaging materials, to grow insulation, to take the place of these permanent materials that we cannot get out of our ecosystem. So this is Ecovative, which started around 2010 and is expanding, exponentially in terms of growing mycelium for this kind of product. And then the final one, which is really kind of the issue of the proper representation of people with disabilities. So we actually are really fortunate to have an exhibition that's coming up in middle December called Access Plus Ability that will be at Cooper Hewitt. Kara McCarty's the curator. And you can just see the world of difference when you look at these two icons. The one on the left is the traditional one that we're all used to. But look at the one on the right, and you see an active person, in a wheelchair. And this is to, reassessing like what it means to be a person with a disability. Even the one on the right is a bit controversial because we associate wheelchairs with disabilities, but in a sense, it's like, sometimes disabilities are invisible. You can't really see them. We all have probably some disability. But this, I think, really kind of hones in on this idea that, people with disabilities can be energetic. They're not immobile. They're very mobile. They're dynamic. And this is an open source icon, so you can go onto the website and There are all different types of versions. There's ones with hiker outfits. So it's a way that you can kind of make it your own. You can sort of, do different colors, whatever. But it's a sort of a reassessing and reevaluating a real important community. I think that's it of my slides. I want to make it quick so we can have discussion. But basically, I guess where I'm coming from is that I feel like design is an important tool for all these things to happen. So thank you. Advance the next slide.
No,
Oh.
don't. We'll stay here.
Or I could go to the first one.
It's on. Leave it on. Are you gonna? You'll get the questions. Yes. Okay. Okay.
But it's important that you use the microphones all the time, so you pass them around.
It's important that I use the microphone the whole time. So, well, thank you all for sharing your work, your perspectives, and your ideas. I think they resonate with most of us in here who either teach design or are practitioners, especially this notion of engaging with communities and engaging with people who need our design thinking in order to solve certain problems. So I think we'll have questions from the audience. I may ask some questions to steer that, and I'll also keep track of the time, and I'll always use a microphone. But I think one of the things that I'm very interested in when working with students is we're very fortunate to be surrounded by designers all the time, and we're in sort of almost an isolated bubble of design. How do we reach out and engage with communities that might be different than us and bring that design thinking in a way that's accessible and doesn't feel like we're imposing an idea on another community?
Something we were talking about yesterday, actually, in the two meetings we had at the Danish consulate and down here at Parsons, was how do you open up the idea of design? And I think a lot of people have been talking about it and working on it for a long time. Not really solved yet. In the context of the Danish Design Award, we see the structure of the categories and the content of the categories as a communication tool. And what we noticed was that in the first 2 years, we've had all sorts of entries, all sorts of projects come forward, which you wouldn't necessarily associate as traditional design projects. I think I did a count in the first year, and only three quarters of the projects that came in weren't from traditional designers. So by framing what design can do within the categories that we have, we hope that we're going to, over time, show that design is much more democratically available than it is at the moment.
Maybe if I may add to that, some important things is it is for free to enter to Danish Design Award, so it doesn't cost anything. That's not really what you normally see around the world. It is very expensive to participate. So it has been possible because of the support from the governmental Danish Design Center and from also the members of Design Denmark, which is the design industry, to make it free. Another important thing I think is that we like people to recommend who should send in also. So we always have a long list that we're looking through for and contacting agencies and companies that is recommended to send into Danish Design Award, and that's also making a huge difference.
But I think partnerships, I mean, what you were talking about, collaboration and sharing, I mean, all of that I think is important. I mean, to have studios, finding organizations, like whether it's Lighthouse or Caring Kind, for instance, elderly with Alzheimer's, I mean, associations like that, I think, can really be helped and want to be helped. And so it's first kind of beginning a discussion, I mean, what are the areas, I mean, what are the needs when you're caring for an elderly person that has Alzheimer's, for example? So I think it's trying to find those partnerships, and then doing a studio that actually having a jury with those people, which I'm sure you all have done. I think that really makes a big step, and I think it just makes the students that much more aware of a community, as you said, they're not familiar with. Although some may be more familiar because of their own personal experiences. So.
Avoiding some of the apprehension of working in communities that might not be your own. I think we're good at collaborating as designers amongst ourselves, but it's reaching out and making sort of larger cross-disciplinary engagement that becomes somewhat challenging. And I think in Denmark you've done that with the designers and the government. So what sort of challenges exist in that type of a collaboration?
None, of course. No, it's obvious that we know it, all of us, that we are coming from each from our planet. The important part is that we, through our intent process that Tim talked about earlier on, has a shared vision, and it's very important that we focus on that when we are working together. And what we try to do in Denmark is to start this movement where you talk good about the other instead of talking about yourself. And by doing that, you also need to understand the other. And you are very interested anyway in doing that in a collaboration that we have. And that movement is the musketeer, way of doing it. Don't talk good about yourself. Talk good about the others. So I think that helps.
Well, you were talking about reaching out to others. It reminds me of a project that took place was one of the entries for this year and last year in the Danish Design Award, where it was called Chemo to Go, and the idea was that you could take your chemotherapy home with you instead of having to be stuck in the hospital. And one of the designers pointed out that when they were doing the research, they had to make themselves look like hospital professionals, because they didn't want to intervene or be perceived differently from a hospital professional. So I think it's a bit of a dichotomy, because sometimes as a designer you have to make yourself invisible. I think every situation is a little bit different. And one of the themes from yesterday that I've been thinking about is how design actually improves your chances of success. So design should be seen as a success enabler, because you cover more bases, you look at more stakeholders, you create something which is likely to succeed with the holistic view that design has. So one strategy may be to begin to associate design with maximizing your chances for success, because everybody wants success.
And I was just going to say that, it's wonderful that there is a collaboration between designers and the government, because need I say more? I think it really, the private sector here in the United States is what, kind of, I think, drives design in many ways, and it's not the government that where there's much of a collaboration. So, kudos to the Danish government.
I just want to say that is correct also, that we do have a wonderful collaboration between with the government, but it's also equally important that we have collaboration with the private sector. And we realized that over the years, some of the last 10 years, that the budgets are low and low, and we do need to collaborate. And to be able to do that, you still need to create friendship, right? And you need to find the passion, the people that's passionate around you, and then do the collaboration around that, and then you'll make a difference. Because that's what it's all about, making a difference.
I just said
Yeah, sure.
I was thinking we were talking also yesterday about the difference between the US and Denmark in terms of support for design, but I don't think it's an either-or situation at all. I think design can, does, and will survive no matter what environment it's growing up in. So, fortunately.
When you also mentioned that the size helps, right? we're a large country, but we can look at our smaller communities as a way to achieve those same goals. Were there any questions out in the audience? Yes.
Hi, Maiken from the Danish consulate. I'm just curious, speaking about size, because size matters sometimes, oftentimes. Could you talk about, and this is mainly a question to the Americans here in the room, a little bit about the role that cities play, and maybe specifically this city that we are in, New York City. What sort of work is done at the moment here at city level, and how does that enable and empower institutions like Parsons?
Well, I think cities are incredibly important on the local level. I mean, there's, everything from bicycle lanes to to larger infrastructure. So I think that of course, it depends on, again, sort of the political leader of the city at the moment. But I think that it makes a huge difference. And maybe that's where it comes down to kind of those more regional areas that kind of help push design in those areas. Do you have anything to add?
Just that I think you have a closer contact with the people for whom you're working, right? So if you're focused on design in a city and you live in the city, it's a lot easier to make the case that good design works because you're one of the people who are experiencing it as well. And so I think that that's, in this current day and age, first-hand experience goes a lot longer than hearsay and trying to apply these sort of ideas onto some other community outside.
I mean, it's probably important to recognize at this moment that the whole idea of subnational governments is really critical to anything that the United States is able to do in relationship to some of the big design challenges that we face during the current administration, right? So you saw that at Bonn this week when you had a former mayor from New York who was joined by current governor Jerry Brown, from California, leading a delegation of subnational capacity to recommit the United States to the Paris Accords. And so I think cities are really it's more than just important in a lot of ways. And in fact, the New York, Copenhagen, or New York Danish collaboration is a very good example of the way cities can function in a transnational way. Around big design changes. So a lot of what we've done in New York, we've learned from Copenhagen, and we've exported a little bit of knowledge as well from New York. But it's in fact been, I think, a really critical platform that cities have to not be bound by their national governments, but really driven by the kind of energy and creativity that is the context of a city to begin with.
I just want to add that we talked about that being here as a group, we learn a lot about ourselves. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Was there anything else from the audience? Well, I'm interested a little bit in communication. So you mentioned this notion of design moving away from object and more towards this idea of activity and agency. But we are an increasingly hyper-visual society. Everything that turns society on is found on the screens of our phones in quick images. And so it's almost as if there's a resurgence of the object or the visual as a means of communicating this is design. So what are some strategies? What are some ways that design that maybe isn't visual can be communicated to people who are not part of this design world? Kind of part of that accessibility aspect.
Am I allowed to disagree in a friendly way? Because I'm not sure. I mean, there's obviously a lot of stuff does happen visually, but design, the result of design is an experience which you feel mentally and physically. and it's a greater challenge to show the design content on a physical experience or a mental experience. But I think it's not just visual. It's we want people to feel good and feel respected, and Jesper mentioned the well-being society. I think the visual element is part of it, but I think and a necessary component for a successful solution. But there's another 2/3, I would say, in how does it make people feel.
I think that it's not correct that we are looking away from the chair and the product design. We actually are very proud about it, and that there is an extremely interesting things coming still, and will continuously do, because we have that in our DNA. We're just very much focused on the fact that design is so much more, and design is integrated in everything that we do. And I think that, and what we shouldn't say in public, but what we do say internally is that we have to see ourselves as a design intelligent nation, because we really care about design into the details, and it's in our DNA. And I think that we're just trying with Danish Design Award to bring the focus on the difference that design can make as well. So that's it.
I enjoyed both presentations. I think scale is a critical question. So when the question of cities came up, and I think Denmark is at 5 million plus population for the entire nation. New York City is 8, 10, depending on how far you reach. The last Danish Design Award, I gave an anecdote about crossing a street in Denmark and not being able to, and someone complaining that I was crossing against a red light, and I turned and I said I didn't speak Danish at the time, and I didn't fully understand. And they said, well, there are windows, meaning that the children will see you. But the question of a normative society, when we talk about details and design details, and I love going to Denmark. However, when I'm in Germany, it's the same. Like, people tell me, someone will walk up behind me on the escalator and say, please move to the right, in English. And they know, because I'm standing on the wrong side, that I must be an English speaker and I'm not German. Can you, our Danish counterparts, discuss the notion of a shared society where a bike delivery person from Mexico rides on the sidewalk and people are infuriated, and you say something, you should ride on the street, and they say, that's totally impolite. Like, cars don't want you on the street, and in Mexico you ride on the sidewalk. How do you deal with that level of difference? And also, as Denmark is a changing nation with migration, what are the impacts of these kinds of things for design?
Well, one of the winners of Danish Design Award was a project where you could order a house which were built as a container and have it put into your garden, because many Danes live in houses, not in apartments. And there then you can have a refugee family living there as long as you feel that you can have it. And to us, when we were talking about this project in jury, that shows heart and care, and that we care. And I have to tell you that if you are crossing a street because it's a red light, we care about you. It's really the reason why, We just don't want to see you, splashed out on the whole street. but
the point was not about the caring. It was really about what does it mean to live in an unnormalized world, which is what we're entering towards globalism, where no longer the media is shared fully, that there are micro cultures, that politics are across Facebook. The idea of even a canonization of design award, the idea of the award, I think, comes into crisis. What does this mean for a Danish Design Award? What does it mean for design?
Tim, do you want to answer that?
Okay.
No, because Tim is not Danish.
I have this special place that I'm the only person from the Danish delegation who's not Danish, so I've experienced the cultural differences of moving to Denmark for the last 20 years. I mean, I think your question is a really, really good question, but I don't have a quick answer to it, because what you're talking about is how can design alleviate cultural misunderstanding. I'm sure it can. No, I doubt it can. But we'd have to set up a project to look at it. But then I would also say that New York is the leading example of diversity working together. So in some ways I might throw some of the research back to New York, and I'll happily participate to see why does it work here? You know, you have over 120 different nations living in New York City working together with all their different backgrounds. It functions really well. So what's going on?
I love an answer which ends with a question. I think it was a really great question. So, fairy tale country, what are you doing in this messed up world? And are you even introducing an award to celebrate, perhaps in a vacuum, what may work there, but may not work in reality? So, great question. We heard from Joel what we experience very much as a nation state, which is in a crisis, that we need to think in a transnational way. So how does a homogeneous nation state with norms that are so ingrained that we, in the best sense, only experience good cop, we experience norms as good, and only good. How do we reinvent ourselves? We do something like this. We invent a concept which is global, which we know more or less something about, and in that way we reinterpret what is not Danish, because Danish is not the most important factor here. But what does it mean to be a global citizen in a messed up world, where we have to think about not how to produce results or profits independently of how the world is going, but how to make the world better. And this is why they sound and play their parts perfectly as figures in a fairy tale. Because if we don't have that dream, and if we don't have this ambition, there's nothing left.
That's why she's the console.
You should see her talking to 500 students.
No comment.
I think you all said it.
Yeah. We have probably time for about one more question, if there's anyone else in the audience that... Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nicole from the Designmuseum Denmark, and I have a question maybe for Matilda or maybe for any other of you that from a museum perspective, I think this is very interesting going to see here at this school what goes on and the whole maker spaces and of course in a school, but in a museum context. We have of course, a focus on objects. We cannot not have a focus on objects, but we also have a focus on making an experience and teaching and getting a broader perspective about design. How do you, we found out that actually making workshops and doing a lot of things with hands-on activities with the objects really broadened our whole wide range of activities and brought a lot of new groups into the museum. How do you do that at the Cooper Hewitt, and how do you, with a hands-on experience and workshops and things like that?
Well, we have a great education department, and so they have a whole design education program where I think it's 3 or 4 stages now, where they actually, it's usually designed around a special exhibition, where they will go into the classroom, design educators, and sort of introduce the idea of design through different kinds of activities. And then they'll invite them back to the museum, maybe a few weeks later, to see the exhibition, have a workshop at the museum that relates to the exhibition. And then they now sort of the next step is following up on that to make sure that they, you know, with those, the in-classroom activity as well as the museum activity, that they can combine those to, you know, kind of hopefully get the kids excited about design. Because, I mean, I think one of the goals of Cooper Hewitt is to have design as part of, you know, a state curriculum. And so this would be, so it's following up on that activity maybe once or even twice. I think this is the first year that we're beginning to experiment with that. So it's not just imposing it, it's really having to kind of follow up at different stages and make sure that this is something that they are applying in different ways. And I think that's sort of the role of the educator, to help both the teacher in the classroom as well as the students to understand that the applications and how design is very much integrated in everything they do.
Well, thank you so much, Matilda, Tim, and Jesper. There's a 15-minute break now for coffee, and then there'll be another session starting at 3:10.
Thanks. Thanks.